Ladies and gentlemen, fear is one of the greatest obstacles standing between us and the success we seek. It is an invisible enemy, yet one powerful enough to paralyze our will, cloud our judgment, and hold us captive within the confines of doubt and hesitation. But fear, like all things, begins in the mind. It is born from our thoughts, and therefore it can be conquered by mastering those very thoughts. The first step to defeating fear is to recognize that our minds are the architects of our destiny. Whatever we consistently think about, whether good or bad, takes root in our subconscious and shapes our actions and outcomes. Fear is merely a negative thought that we allow to grow unchecked. But if we can learn to control the direction of our thinking, we can starve fear of its power. How do we control our thoughts? It begins with discipline. Just as a gardener tends his garden, pulling out weeds and nurturing flowers, so too must we tend the garden of our minds. We must uproot every thought of doubt, worry, and anxiety, replacing them with thoughts of courage, confidence, and determination. Imagine your mind as a fortress. Fear tries to break down the walls through constant negative chatter and self-defeating beliefs, but you are the commander of that fortress. You decide what thoughts are allowed to enter and take hold. When fear attempts to invade, you must stand firm and refuse entry. Command your mind with purpose and unwavering focus. Another key to defeating fear is to act in spite of it. Action is the antidote to fear's paralysis. Every time you confront fear with deliberate action, you weaken its grip on you. It is in action that confidence is born. With each small victory over fear, your mind builds a new habit, a habit of courage. Remember, fear thrives in uncertainty and ignorance. The more knowledge you acquire and the more you prepare yourself, the less reason there is for fear to exist. Preparation lights a torch in the darkness, illuminating the path ahead and reducing the shadows in which fear hides. Finally, surround yourself with positive influences, people who believe in you and encourage your growth. Thoughts are contagious. The company you keep can either strengthen your resolve or feed your fears. In conclusion, fear is not a permanent condition. It is a challenge to be met, a trial to be overcome. By mastering your thoughts, disciplining your mind, taking action, and preparing yourself, you hold the key to breaking free from fear's chains. The moment you control your thoughts, you control your destiny. Fear is defeated when you refuse to let it control you. Fear originates in the mind and is sustained by negative thinking. It is not some external force that swoops in to control us. It is a product of our own mental patterns. Every fear we experience begins as a single thought, often subtle, uninvited, and unnoticed. That thought, if not checked, grows roots in our consciousness, shaping our emotions, influencing our actions, and slowly limiting our potential. Fear does not have a life of its own. We give it life through constant attention, repetition, and belief. Consider the mind as fertile soil. Whatever seeds are planted will grow. If you plant seeds of doubt, worry, and defeat, you will grow fear. If you plant thoughts of strength, hope, and determination, you will grow courage. The mind does not discriminate between positive or negative. It only accepts what you allow to dominate it. Fear is simply the natural result of mental focus placed repeatedly on possible failure, danger, or suffering. Most people never stop to realize that they are the ones feeding fear daily. They dwell on what-if scenarios. What if I fail? What if they reject me? What if I lose everything? These are thoughts rehearsed over and over again, often without challenge. The mind, hearing these questions constantly, begins to believe them. It forms mental habits around them, and what begins as mild concern eventually grows into full-blown fear, all because we allowed negative thoughts to take up residence. What we think about, we move toward. If we think about fear, we attract more fear. If we constantly imagine the worst, our bodies respond as if danger is real, even if it is only imagined. Our hearts race, our palms sweat, and our minds freeze. These physiological responses only reinforce the belief that something is wrong, but in truth, the only thing wrong is the way we are thinking. Fear, when you trace it back to its source, is not based on truth or fact. It is based on perception. Perception is formed by thought. Two people can face the same situation. One will see it as an opportunity and the other as a threat. The difference lies not in the event, but in how each person interprets it. Interpretation is a choice. It is shaped by past experiences, internal beliefs, and habitual thinking patterns. Change the thought, and you change the perception. Change the perception, and fear loses its grip. The most dangerous aspect of fear is how subtle and deceptive it can be. It disguises itself as caution, as logic, as realism. It whispers to you that it is only protecting you, but what it is really doing is limiting you. It keeps you from taking necessary risks, from stepping into growth, from realizing your potential, and the more you listen to it, the louder it becomes. Every time you surrender to fear, you reinforce it. Every time you allow negative thinking to rule, you deepen its roots. The power of the mind to shape reality cannot be overstated. Your outer life is a direct reflection of your inner thoughts. If your mind is filled with fear, your life will be filled with limitation. If your mind is filled with courage, your life will open to new possibilities. But this power works both ways. Just as positive thoughts create success, negative thoughts create fear. And unlike external enemies, fear cannot be outrun. It must be outthought. You can never escape fear by changing your surroundings, your job, or your circumstances alone. As long as your thinking remains fearful, fear will follow you. The battle must be fought and won in the mind. This is where fear is born, and this is where it must be defeated. And the weapon to defeat it is awareness. You must become aware of your thoughts, not once in a while, but constantly. You must observe what you allow yourself to think about, and what narratives you repeat in your mind. Negative thinking is not always loud or dramatic. Often it's quiet and disguised. It sounds like self-criticism, like hesitance, like hesitation masquerading as prudence. It sounds like a small voice telling you that you're not ready yet, that you're not good enough, or that you're bound to fail. These are the seeds of fear, and left unchecked, they become beliefs that control your life. You do not need to silence all fear immediately, but you must stop feeding it. Stop giving it power by obsessing over negative outcomes. Redirect your mental focus. Begin to train your mind to dwell on what can go right, on what you want instead of what you fear. This is not naive optimism. It is strategic discipline. You cannot afford the luxury of negative thought. Your future depends on mastering your inner dialogue. Fear only survives where it is invited, where it is nurtured, where it is believed. You are the master of your thoughts. Discipline is essential. This truth is simple, but its power is immense. Every thought that enters your mind does so with your permission, whether conscious or unconscious. While it may not always feel that way, especially when you're overwhelmed by worry or distracted by noise, the reality is that your mind is your domain. And like any domain, if left unguarded, it can be taken over by forces that do not serve you, forces like fear, doubt, and confusion. Many people allow their minds to run without direction, reacting to every emotion, every piece of news, every challenge that arises. They drift mentally, absorbing whatever thoughts come from the outside world. Thoughts from the media, from conversations, from social media, from the opinions of others. But drifting is dangerous. A mind without discipline is like a ship without a rudder, easily tossed by the waves and blown off course by the slightest wind. It ends up wherever the current takes it, rarely where the person truly wants to go. Discipline is the rudder. Discipline is the act of taking command over what thoughts are allowed to stay and which must be rejected. It means you do not simply think whatever pops into your head. You examine those thoughts. You challenge them, you ask, is this useful? Is this empowering? Is this true? If the answer is no, you discard the thought. You replace it with one that aligns with your goals, your purpose, and your values. Thoughts are not passive, they are seeds. Every thought you entertain begins to shape your beliefs. Those beliefs form your expectations then drive your actions, and your actions determine your results. This chain of cause and effect starts in the mind. That's why discipline over thought is not optional, it's foundational. The undisciplined mind becomes a breeding ground for fear, mediocrity, and failure. The disciplined mind becomes a forge for strength, focus, and success. Mental discipline requires practice. Just like physical training, it demands consistency and effort. You don't build a strong body by exercising once a month. You build it through daily effort, through repetition, through sweat. The same applies to the mind. You must train it every day. That means reading things that strengthen your mindset. That means speaking words that reflect belief in yourself. That means taking a moment each day to silence the noise and check in with the direction of your thoughts. It also means setting clear intentions. The disciplined mind does not wander aimlessly. It starts the day with purpose. It knows what it wants to focus on. It is aware of what it's trying to accomplish, and it protects that focus with intensity. Distractions are everywhere. Messages, calls, worries, demands. But a disciplined mind is not easily swayed. It is anchored in clarity. It is guided by vision. The truth is, you already have the ability to master your thoughts. It is not a gift only given to a few. It is a skill anyone can develop, but it takes effort. You have to want it badly enough to put in the mental work. That means catching yourself when your thoughts spiral into fear or criticism. That means refusing to dwell on failure, and instead choosing to dwell on lessons and next steps. It means being vigilant, not letting your mental guard down just because things get hard. Most people don't fail because they lack talent or opportunity. They fail because they let their thoughts go unchecked. They give in to fear-based thinking. They listen to the voice in their head that says you can't, and they believe it not because it's true, but because they didn't challenge it. Discipline means you don't accept every thought as truth. You treat each thought as a visitor. You decide whether it stays or leaves. When you control your thoughts, you begin to control your behavior. When you control your behavior, you begin to control your outcomes. But it all starts at the thought level. That's where the roots are. That's where the work must begin. You don't need perfect circumstances. You don't need more time. You don't need approval. You need discipline. You need to take full responsibility for your mind. Every thought is a choice. Every choice is a step. You either move toward strength or toward weakness. Nothing stays still, and it is your discipline that determines which direction you go. Replace fear-based thoughts with thoughts of courage and confidence. This principle is not about ignoring fear or pretending it doesn't exist. It is about consciously choosing to shift your mental focus. Fear cannot exist in the same mental space as courage. When you allow thoughts of fear to dominate your mind, you are handing over your power. But the moment you replace those thoughts with images of strength, action, and belief, you begin to change the entire atmosphere of your mind. Fear-based thoughts often appear logical. They sound like concern, caution, or realism. They whisper subtle doubts like, "What if I fail?" or "I'm not ready yet." These thoughts may seem like they're protecting you, but they are doing the opposite. They are trapping you. The longer you entertain them, the more they take root. They begin to shape your self-image, influence your behavior, and define your limits. The problem is not the presence of fear. It is your agreement with it. To break free from this pattern, you must actively and deliberately replace those fear-based thoughts with ones rooted in courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to move forward in spite of it. And confidence is not arrogance. It is trust in your ability to handle what lies ahead. The mind does not automatically default to these empowering thoughts. You must plant them, nurture them, and reinforce them until they become your new normal. One of the most effective ways to do this is through visualization. The mind responds strongly to images. If you consistently visualize yourself failing, being rejected, or falling short, your emotions and body will respond accordingly. But if you begin to visualize yourself succeeding, taking bold action, speaking with clarity, and standing tall in difficult moments, your internal chemistry begins to shift. Your emotions align with your vision. Your body responds with energy, your posture changes, your voice strengthens, all from a shift in thought. Affirmations are another powerful tool. What you say to yourself consistently becomes what you believe. If your internal dialogue is full of "I can't," "I'm not good enough," or "I always mess things up," you are building a belief system based on fear. But if you begin to speak truth into your mind, statements like "I am capable," "I handle challenges with strength," or "I trust myself to grow," you start to overwrite those old patterns. Your brain begins to form new connections, and those connections form the foundation of a new mindset. This process does not happen overnight. Just as fear took time to establish itself, courage and confidence must be developed through repetition. You have to catch yourself when fear-based thoughts creep in, not later, not tomorrow, in the moment. When you notice yourself thinking, "I'll probably fail," stop and replace it with, "Even if I stumble, I will learn and improve." That one shift in thought can change how you approach the situation, how you feel about yourself, and what actions you take. It also helps to anchor your courageous thoughts to past experiences. Everyone has overcome something. Everyone has faced something that once seemed impossible. Remind yourself of those victories. Recall how you felt when you pushed through. Use that memory as fuel to shape your current thinking. Tell yourself, "I've been strong before, I can be strong now." Fear shrinks when you remind it of your strength. Surrounding yourself with courage-based input also makes a difference. What you watch, what you listen to, who you spend time with, these all influence your thought patterns. If you constantly feed your mind stories of failure, criticism, and drama, fear-based thinking will flourish. But if you fill your environment with stories of growth, persistence, and victory, you give your mind a new model to follow. You begin to internalize the idea that courage is possible, that confidence is available, and that fear is not your ruler. Fear-based thoughts will still try to return, especially when you step outside your comfort zone. That's natural. But now, instead of accepting them as truth, you recognize them for what they are: signals, not commands. They are reminders that you are pushing boundaries. They are not instructions to retreat. You acknowledge the fear, and then you choose differently. You replace it. You redirect your mind toward courage. This choice to replace fear-based thinking is not a one-time event. It is a daily discipline, a mental habit, a way of life. You become what you consistently think about, and when courage and confidence are the thoughts you feed, those qualities grow stronger within you. The fear may not disappear, but it will no longer control your decisions. Action is the antidote to fear. Act in spite of it. Fear thrives in inaction. It grows stronger when you hesitate, when you delay, when you sit and overanalyze every possibility. The longer you wait, the louder fear becomes. It feeds off your doubts and multiplies in your indecision. But when you take action, even a small step, you interrupt fear's cycle. You shift from being a passive thinker to an active doer, and that single shift begins to reclaim your power. Many people make the mistake of waiting until they feel fearless before they take action. They wait for the perfect moment, the perfect plan, the perfect confidence. That moment rarely comes. Fear does not disappear on its own. It is only weakened through movement. You don't need to be fearless to act. You need to act in spite of fear. Courage is built through action, not before it. Confidence is gained by doing, not by waiting. The mind often plays tricks, trying to convince you that you need more preparation before you begin. But the truth is, most of the preparation you need happens after you start. The very act of moving forward sends a signal to your mind that you are in control. It says, "I will not be ruled by fear." And that signal changes everything. It changes your energy. It changes your focus. It changes how you perceive yourself. The moment you begin to act, even if you are afraid, your body responds with momentum. You gain clarity not by thinking, but by engaging. The fog that fear creates begins to lift as you step into motion. Fear often makes things look worse than they are. It magnifies the risk, distorts the consequences, and shrinks your sense of capability. But action brings reality into focus. It reveals the truth. Sometimes the thing you feared most turns out to be nothing more than a shadow. Sometimes the risk is manageable, the obstacle is smaller than it appeared, and your ability to handle it is greater than you thought. You only find that out when you move forward. Thinking will not show you what action can prove. Taking action does not mean you need to make a giant leap. It means you take one step, one call, one decision. One move in the direction of your goal. That one action creates momentum, and momentum is fear's enemy. When you are in motion, fear has less room to grow. Each step forward reinforces your belief that you are capable. It builds a track record of courage, even if that courage felt shaky at the start. The habit of action also builds mental toughness. The more you act despite fear, the less power fear holds. You begin to rewire your brain to associate fear not with paralysis, but with opportunity. Fear becomes a signal that you're on the edge of growth, not danger. You start to see fear not as a stop sign, but as a signpost pointing toward your next breakthrough. This shift happens only through repeated exposure, by consistently acting in moments where fear tries to hold you back. One of the most effective strategies for defeating fear is to shorten the gap between intention and action. The longer that gap, the more time fear has to creep in. When you have an idea, take a step toward it immediately. When you feel resistance, confront it head on. Don't wait for the fear to subside. Act before it gains strength. Speed matters when facing fear because hesitation invites doubt, but action reinforces belief. Sometimes fear shows up in the form of perfectionism. You convince yourself that everything must be perfectly aligned before you move, but perfection is a disguise. It's a form of fear pretending to be high standards. Perfection delays action. It keeps you stuck in preparation mode forever. But progress is made in the doing, not in the planning. You learn by doing, adjust as you go, and improve through experience. Waiting to be perfect before you act is just another form of fear. You don't have to eliminate all uncertainty before you move. You simply need to move with the intention to learn, to grow, and to persist. Action does not promise success every time, but it guarantees growth. Even if the outcome is not what you expected, you are further along than you were before. You've gained experience. You've weakened the grip of fear. And most importantly, you've proved to yourself that you can move forward even when afraid. This is how breakthroughs happen, not by sitting and hoping, not by overthinking and doubting, but by standing up and doing the thing that fear tells you not to do. Action breaks fear's illusion. It cuts through mental noise and makes space for clarity, for strength, and for possibility. You will never think your way completely out of fear, but you can move your way through it. Preparation and knowledge reduce fear by eliminating uncertainty. Much of what we fear is rooted not in reality, but in the unknown. When the mind cannot predict what will happen, it begins to imagine the worst. It fills in the blanks with doubts, exaggerations, and false assumptions. The more unclear a situation is, the more room fear has to grow. But when you prepare yourself, when you gather knowledge and insight, you shrink that space. You remove the mystery and fear loses its foundation. Fear feeds on questions without answers. What if I fail? What if I make a mistake? What if I'm not good enough? These questions often arise from a lack of information or experience. But when you are prepared, when you have studied, practiced, and learned, the answers begin to emerge. You gain perspective. You begin to understand what is likely, what is possible, and what is manageable. You move from reacting emotionally to responding intelligently. Preparation builds familiarity, and familiarity breeds confidence. Think about any task you were once afraid of: public speaking, driving a car, starting a new job. In the beginning, there was fear because everything was new. But as you spent more time learning the process, understanding the steps, and practicing the skills, that fear diminished. Not because the situation changed, but because you changed. You gained knowledge, you became prepared, and through that preparation, uncertainty faded. There is a difference between imagined fear and informed caution. Imagined fear is based on assumptions. Informed caution is based on facts. When you are unprepared, it's easy to confuse the two. But once you equip yourself with knowledge, you begin to separate real risks from imagined dangers. You stop making decisions based on anxiety and start making them based on understanding. And that shift gives you control. Preparation also creates a sense of readiness. It tells your mind, I've done the work, I've studied the terrain, I know the process. This internal message quiets the noise of fear. It gives you something solid to stand on. You are no longer stepping into the unknown blindly. You are stepping forward with insight and strategy. Even if challenges arise, you are more equipped to handle them because your mind is already trained to respond rather than panic. Knowledge also brings clarity. When you seek to understand what you fear, you begin to break it down. You see its parts. You understand its causes. And when you understand something, you can begin to manage it. It no longer seems so overwhelming. You can make plans, set strategies, and take logical steps forward. Fear begins to shrink in proportion to how well you understand what you're facing. The pursuit of knowledge is not just about collecting facts. It's about building inner certainty. It's about giving your mind something solid to trust in. You can't eliminate all risk, but you can reduce the power that risk has over you. When you're informed, you don't freeze in the face of decisions. You assess, you weigh, you move forward. That is the strength that comes from preparation. Many people underestimate the power of preparation because they see it as boring or slow, but what they don't see is that every moment spent preparing is a deposit into your confidence. It's a defense against fear. It's a quiet investment that pays dividends when pressure rises. The person who is unprepared must rely on luck. The person who is prepared relies on skill, and that skill is what calms the mind when others are panicking. Even in the face of big goals or intimidating challenges, preparation turns the mountain into a series of manageable steps. It breaks down the overwhelming into the understandable. It gives structure to your effort. And with structure comes focus. When you are focused, fear has no room to run wild. You have a direction. You know what to do next. And knowing what to do next is one of the simplest, most powerful ways to stay grounded in the face of fear. Knowledge is not about having every answer in advance. It's about knowing enough to begin. It's about understanding the landscape well enough that you're not surprised by every twist and turn. It gives you the flexibility to adjust, the wisdom to anticipate, and the calm to proceed. You can't predict every outcome, but with preparation and learning, you can equip yourself to respond effectively no matter what comes. This is the mindset of those who overcome fear, not that they have no fear at all, but that they meet it with preparation. They do the work, they study, they practice, they ask questions, and they seek answers, and in doing so, they transform fear from a wall into a doorway. Surround yourself with influences that feed belief, not fear. The mind is fertile soil, and what is planted in it, through words, images, ideas, and energy, determines what grows. No one exists in isolation. Every day, consciously or unconsciously, you absorb thoughts, emotions, and attitudes from your environment. And just as healthy food nourishes the body, positive influences nourish the mind. But the opposite is also true. Negative influences, especially those rooted in fear, can poison your thinking and weaken your courage. Fear is often contagious. It can be passed along in a conversation, a look, a warning, or a story repeated often enough. If you are surrounded by people who constantly doubt, who expect the worst, who magnify problems, and who dismiss possibilities, then you will begin to mirror their mindset. Not because you are weak, but because the mind, when unguarded, naturally adapts to its environment. It begins to reflect what it is most exposed to. That is why it is essential to intentionally choose the influences that shape your thinking. Surround yourself with voices that speak faith, not fear. People who believe in possibilities, who remind you of your strength, who encourage action and growth even in uncertain times. These individuals don't pretend that obstacles don't exist. They simply refuse to be paralyzed by them. They speak from a place of conviction, and that conviction feeds your own belief. The books you read, the podcasts you listen to, the media you consume, all of these are either lifting you up or pulling you down. They are either expanding your vision or shrinking it. They are either reinforcing fear or strengthening your confidence. You must be selective. You must become the guardian of your mental environment, choosing carefully what you allow in. Even subtle messages repeated over time shape the way you think, the way you act, and what you believe is possible. Sometimes the most dangerous influences are not loud or obvious. They may be the friends who mean well but always tell you to play it safe. The family members who project their own fears onto your dreams, the coworkers who mock ambition or discourage change. These voices may come from people you care about, but if their mindset is rooted in fear, their influence can be quietly destructive. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to argue with them. But you do have to manage your exposure. Surrounding yourself with belief also means seeking out stories of courage. When you see examples of others who have faced fear and still moved forward, something inside you awakens. You begin to realize that fear is not unique to you. Everyone has it, but some people choose to act in spite of it. Their stories become a mirror, showing you what's possible. Their lives become proof that belief can win over doubt. Mentors and role models play a powerful role in this. When you spend time with people who have walked the path you wish to walk, people who have turned fear into fuel, you begin to internalize their mindset. You learn how they think, how they prepare, how they speak to themselves in hard times. And by absorbing their wisdom, you begin to develop your own strength. You start to see yourself not as a person who avoids fear, but as one who overcomes it. Community matters. Isolation magnifies fear, but connection to strong, courageous people reduces it. When you are surrounded by others who are also striving, who are also pushing boundaries and confronting challenges, you don't feel alone. You feel supported, you feel understood, and most importantly, you feel inspired. Being around belief makes you more likely to believe. Influences are not only external, they are internal, too. What you say to yourself, how you think about your future, how you interpret setbacks, all of these are internal influences that must be guided by belief. The voice inside your mind is always speaking. You must train it to speak with encouragement, clarity, and strength. When fear whispers, you respond with truth. When doubt creeps in, you answer it with vision. This is how you shape your inner environment to match the strength you want to express in the outer world. You become like the influences you absorb. That is why choosing belief is not a one-time decision. It is a continuous practice. You must surround yourself daily with the kind of energy that builds you up. You must align yourself with people, content, and environments that remind you of your power, not your weakness. The more time you spend in the presence of belief, the more naturally that belief will grow inside you.